Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Suits and Laterals. This is number 8. You're listening to the voice of Jeff Rich at the moment. I'm joined by Chris Green. Chris, it's been a while since we've spoken. 3 weeks into the NFL season, some early thoughts.
Well, I mean, it's been a little bit of a surprise as far as the success and failure of some of the teams out there. I mean, I don't know how many people expected the Ravens to be 0-3 at this point, and vice versa. I don't know how many people expected the Panthers or the Falcons to be 3-0. So, some different teams on top and some different teams on the bottom. Lots of big injuries already. You've got Brandon Weeden leading the Cowboys now, and see what happens down there. Obviously, they didn't succeed in his first start, but time will tell if he is the same quarterback that Browns fans love to remember, or if he can actually make a difference for Dallas.
Well, that was a battle of 2-0s. It looked like the Cowboys had control of that game. I was just following on the scroller at the bottom. It looked like the Cowboys got out to a big lead, and Atlanta did what they've done every week, and that's lead a fourth quarter comeback. That seems to be kind of the theme for Matt Ryan throughout his career with the Falcons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is he always seems to be bringing them back. It's usually the defense letting him down, and he gets behind, and then he can drive them back. I mean, he does have Julio Jones there to be his savior. I mean, he's already got 34 catches this year, and I know he's on some absurd pace for like 2,400 receiving yards. I mean, obviously, I don't think he's going to sustain that, but he's definitely looked pretty darn good in Kyle Shanahan's offense down there.
Yeah, didn't Atlanta get that pick through a trade?
Yeah, we don't want to go into that, though.
Hey, come on. That trade netted the Browns, Greg Little, Brandon Weeden, Phil Taylor, and bunch of other spare parts.
Oh, yeah, just another of the brilliant moves over the years by the Browns front office.
Hey, we tend to bury the lead around here, but not today. We're going to talk about these 3-0 teams. A little later in the show, we're going to talk about the Jets and the Dolphins. More specifically, what's going on with the international game as it's developed. I believe it's in like its 6th or 7th year at this point. It's pretty wild that we've kept putting games over there year after year. They're doing more things, and it seems like that game in London gets to be kind of the NFL's experiment with a few things. I know that they're doing a digital stream of a game on Yahoo a little later in the season, so we'll probably talk about that later on. But let's get into it with some of these 3-0 teams. One team probably the least surprised, or at least tied for the not surprising 3-0 start because Tom Brady is on the field. You have the New England Patriots. They did get to Tom Brady's suspension down to 0. They're blowing teams out. They're kind of doing what you expected them to do. But if you read the Boston Herald, Bill Belichick's not too excited about this 3-0 start.
Does Bill Belichick ever get excited?
There's probably like family reunions and Christmas, or at least the beginning of the Grinch Who Stole Christmas that Bill probably gets excited. But I have to agree with that take. It's probably a pretty common occurrence for him to not get excited, even when his team is extremely successful.
Yeah, I mean they've been extremely successful since he's been there. I mean, in all honesty, obviously they've won several championships and they've been to the Super Bowl a few other times on top of that. But I mean, if you look beyond the cheating scandals that have been going on there throughout the years too, he's always been the same guy, whether he was in Cleveland or in New England or wherever else he's been. But I mean, New England, I would say, is a little bit lucky at this point because Brady's suspension got reduced to nothing. I mean, it may have been a completely different story if Garoppolo had been the quarterback for those 3 games, but lo and behold, Brady's there. They're scoring tons of points and on pace to set a new NFL record for scoring in a season, and we'll see if they can maintain that. I mean, they still are a older team, so just because they get out to a fast start doesn't mean they'll be able to maintain it at the end of the year, too.
Well, we know that Brady's going to get his, Gronk's going to get his. They're going to find Edelman, but are you a little surprised at the involvement of Dion Lewis and his emergence? Because he's bounced around the league a little bit since coming in undrafted. You always wait for the other shoe to drop with Bill Belichick, especially if you play fantasy football. I happen to have Deion Lewis on my team, but so I'm waiting for LeGarrette Blount to start getting 24 carries a game once I insert Deion Lewis into my starting lineup.
Yeah, well, I mean, beyond Joe Banner, did anybody else really expect this from Deion Lewis?
I don't think so. I mean, he's not there in Sproles. He's far from the back that LeGarrette Blount is. The Patriots, I believe, let go of Jonas Gray, who, it's just whoever gets the ball to balance out that New England passing attack a little bit. I think the days of the 80% passing, 20% running game are over. I think you still need to run the ball in the National Football League. It looked like we were going completely away from the run, and it seems like they've pumped the brakes on that. Teams are getting a little more honest to the pass, and you have to be able to run the football to win. Am I wrong in that assumption?
No, I mean, I think you're going to see some teams that throw the ball more than others. I mean, we'll get into Denver here shortly and what's going on with their run game and pass game, but it's just there's certain teams that are geared more to passing than running, and it depends on your quarterback is what it really comes down to. The teams that have a Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, a Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck, those are the teams that are going to throw the ball more because they have outstanding quarterbacks who can throw the ball, whereas if you're a Cleveland Browns team or Houston Texans, someone along those lines where you're shaky at the quarterback situation, then you're probably going to try to rely on your run game a little bit more.
And that's the way you protect your quarterback. You got to run the football. Otherwise, your quarterback has no expectation of safety if you're unable to run the football. If you're dropping back every play, you can send the blitz. You don't have to worry about a running back blowing by you like Latavius Murray did by the Cleveland Browns on Sunday because they were unable to establish. The Raiders were able to establish the pass, which set up the run, but that's not a game we want to talk about because we're focused on 3-0. The AFC North has a little bit of everything going on. You have the Ravens at 0-3. Above them, you have the Browns at 1-2. Then you have the Steelers at 2-1. Their only loss is to the Patriots, but they didn't exactly dominate the St. Louis Rams last Sunday. And at the top of the division, maybe a little bit of surprise, maybe not. The Cincinnati Bengals, that game was basically a coin flip with the Baltimore Ravens. Records aside, there was at the end of the day, there was a 3-0 team and an 0-3 team. This sets up pretty well for Cincinnati to get out to a big lead, if not run away with the AFC North. What are your thoughts? How much of the Bengals have you seen, and what are your thoughts on them?
Well, I mean, I guess the biggest surprise right now is how well Andy Dalton's playing. I mean, he's thrown 8 touchdowns with only 1 interception in the first 3 games. A.J. Green finally looks healthy after being injury-plagued throughout last year, and their defense seems to be back. So while Cincinnati's definitely started out well at 3-0, I mean, let's be honest, they've made the playoffs each of the last several years, and they can't get past that first-round game. So really, at the end of the day, until they can do that, nobody's really going to take them seriously, to be honest. And, I'm still waiting for the real Andy Dalton to appear. I just can't see him keeping up the same pace throughout the season.
So, I mean, are you looking at the Bengals as a team that's going to hold serve for the next 13 weeks and then, make a statement or not make a statement in January?
Pretty much, I would say that I think they have a very good chance to make the playoffs. I expect them to probably be in the 11-5, 12-4 range, which is pretty similar to what they've been the last few years. And then I have a hard time seeing them getting past that first round. I mean, at some point they're going to have to prove everybody wrong, but until they do that, it's just going to be same old Bengals.
All right, let's move on to the AFC West, where you have the Denver Broncos at 3-0. Probably should have lost at least one of those games. They were in control of the game against Detroit on Sunday Night Football. Never really fully pulled away. New guy at the top, John Fox out, Gary Kubiak in. Figure the zone running scheme's back, and we're going to revisit the days of Terrell Davis and Olandis Gary with C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman. It hasn't really worked out that way for the Broncos.
No, I mean, they're on a historical pace as far as the run game goes for the wrong reasons. I mean, they haven't topped 80 yards yet in any of their 3 games, and I mean their running performances dropped in each of the last 3 games. So, and really considering that Peyton Manning hasn't exactly played well for most of the first 3 weeks, they are very lucky to be 3-0. The reason they are 3-0 right now is their defense, which has been number 1 in the league, and I mean that's not exactly what Denver has been known for over the years. I mean they've put a lot of money into it, obviously, the last couple of years to try and get them to the Super Bowl. They've invested in that defense to help out Peyton Manning, but he's starting to show his age, so they're going to have to rely a little bit more on that defense this year unless he somehow drinks some magic elixir or something.
Well, that was the foundation for what this team was. Probably what made them so tempting. That and John Elway to Peyton Manning in free agency a couple of years ago. You remember those Tim Tebow teams. Tim Tebow won a lot of games, but honestly, the special teams and defense of the Denver Broncos won those games. And then the defense has kind of dropped off the last couple of years under John Fox, which is kind of surprising because he is a defensive guy. But looking at this, I mean, it's like 80-20 passing for the Denver Broncos offense. Is that sustainable with a 40-year-old quarterback like Peyton Manning is?
I don't see how once the weather starts to get worse. I mean, he is playing in Denver, which isn't exactly a boon for weather at any time. But I mean, that was one of the big things people were concerned about when he came out there after playing in Indianapolis all the years in the Dome, is would he be able to handle the weather out there? And I mean, the last couple of years he's been fine, but I'll tell you what, those first 2 weeks he did not look good at all. He did look a little bit better the other night, but we'll see if it continues to translate. I mean, but he's got to get some help from that running game. I mean, C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman were much better last year, so you got to believe at some point they're going to kind of turn it on. And I mean, historically, the zone blocking scheme has been really effective as far as the run game goes, so it's actually kind of surprising how much trouble they've had with the running game early on.
All right, nobody undefeated in the AFC South. Ditto for the NFC East. Moving down to the NFC North. The Green Bay Packers. Are they perhaps the most legit 3-0 team based on who they've played so far?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about that is, we've mentioned this, especially I've mentioned this, is anytime you have Aaron Rodgers, you definitely have a chance. And I mean, despite the fact that they've had several players get hurt already, and they're down to their 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th receiver options, that he still keeps putting up the points. So as long as Aaron Rodgers is there, they have a chance. Like I said, the defense has just got to hang in there. And I mean, last night was kind of a tale of 2 halves. They really shut down Kansas City in the first half. I mean, they're not exactly an offensive juggernaut, but they are a solid team. But they kind of, at the end there, Kansas City was coming back and made it interesting, at least. I don't know if that was more just prevent defense or what, but they are definitely a solid team, and I definitely expect to see them in the thick of things at the end of the year, assuming they don't lose too many more players.
Right, and those injuries, I mean, that forces guys like Richard Rodgers and Jeff Janis into the offense. I think that Randall Cobb's done a really good job of assuming that number 1 role. But I also give a lot of credit to Rodgers and to Mike McCarthy for scheming the offense to fit Cobb rather than Nelson, and just for them to be able to make the plays, they integrate the fullbacks. Rodgers plays a little bit of fullback. Obviously, John Kuhn is the is the guy whose name who they chant all the time. I do want to visit this really quickly because people are there's some buzz on the internet about Pro Football Focus saying that Aaron Rodgers played below average to average game. That doesn't pass the eyeball test with me. Your thoughts on that, Chris?
I'm kind of shocked by that, actually, but I've also heard that Pro Football Focus has said the Browns' offensive line is top 5 this year, and if anybody's watched any of those games, they'd be shocked by that too. But they're normally a pretty reliable thing, but I gotta say, I watched the game last night, and I'd love to have Aaron Rodgers playing that way on my team any week.
Okay, let's move on to the NFC South, where there are 2 undefeated teams. You have the Carolina Panthers, who look like they're getting their sea legs under them, as the years go by. Cam Newton kind of coming into his own, the subject of a little bit of controversy himself there with Ed Hockley saying that he wasn't old enough to get a flag for roughing, which is interesting in that there's some objectivity to or subjectivity to those roughing the quarterback calls, and the older guys get the calls and the younger guys don't, and it's funny that would come up. Whether it's true or not is to be debated. But that Carolina defense seems to be carrying them, do they not?
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest. Carolina's played 3 games against Jacksonville, Houston, and New Orleans. New Orleans didn't have Drew Brees. Jacksonville has Blake Bortles, and Houston used a combination of Ryan Mallett and Brian Hoyer at quarterback. So they're not exactly playing the Tom Brady Patriots or Aaron Rodgers Packers. So that defense doesn't have as many challenges in those games. And here's the other thing to look at. They've squeaked out all 3 of those games. I mean, they're winning just about a touchdown in each of the games, and those aren't exactly 3 strong opponents. So I think it's a little bit early to be championing them yet. I mean, I think they have a solid team, but I'm not going to say they're one of the elite teams.
All right, that brings us to the team in my backyard, or down the street anyway, the Arizona Cardinals. They're scoring points in bunches. I don't know what you think of their schedule because San Francisco hasn't been the same team from week to week to week. They played the New Orleans Saints in week 1, and we played the 23-punt Chicago Bears in week 2, and they blew them out at Soldier Field. So not the strongest schedule, but they also don't appear to be playing in the strongest division. I think it's fair to say, no disrespect to Atlanta in the NFC South. They've come from behind. They've played some decent teams, and they've done what they've had to do. But I think it's a 2-team race in the NFC based on what I've seen so far between the Green Bay Packers and the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I mean, we can probably still throw Seattle in there. I know it's a little bit early, and they struggled early last year as well. But Arizona, I mean, in all honesty, Arizona was right in the thick of things last year until they lost their quarterbacks. I mean, you lost Carson Palmer, and then you lost, what was the backup name? I always mix him up. It's Drew Stanton. They were down to their 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks at the end of the season, and neither of them played very well. So if it wasn't for that, I could have seen Arizona making some noise in the playoffs. I mean, they've got a terrific defense. Carson Palmer has been terrific for them since he got there, and Larry Fitzgerald seems to be having a little bit of a comeback this year. So, I mean, that's kind of funny to say considering it's Larry Fitzgerald, but he is getting up there a little bit in wide receiver years. But they're a very strong team, and I don't minimize their 3-0 start as much as I do Carolina's, regardless of the teams that they played.
And I think that's fair. I mean, I think that the Cardinals come with a strong defense. There were some questions on what losing Todd Bowles would mean, and then the Jets got out to that 2-0 start before screwing the pooch against the Philadelphia Eagles, who I still don't think are a very good football team. But Jim Betcher stepped it up. That defense is playing strong. That Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, had all kinds of question marks on him. Justin Bethel's been a special teams hero, and he's finally getting some snaps with Cromartie, parting for the New York Jets. And I'll tell you what, I mean, it's not featuring Patrick Peterson. It's not featuring Kevin Minter, who was supposed to replace Carlos Dansby. Darrell Washington is basically lost forever for the Arizona Cardinals. And Dan Williams departed in free agency, and they're still one of the top teams, if not the top team defensively in the NFC. And by the way, they lead the league in scoring.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, let's be honest too. As much as he doesn't get I guess he gets a decent amount of credit. Bruce Arians has won as a head coach everywhere he's been, whether the season he took over for Chuck Pagano or since he's got to Arizona. So, I mean, until he has a non-winning season, I can't rule anything out with him. He's doing a heck of a job. What's
funny is that Arians was going to walk away. He was going to retire. And he was honestly going to walk away from the game after he couldn't make it work with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. Pagano gives him a call, says, hey, I'm going to take this Colts job. You want to help me out? He says, sure, I'll help you out. Pagano, obviously gets struck with illness, and Arians takes over and has a wonderful run in Andrew Luck's rookie year, and it keeps him around the game some more to take over for Ken Wisenhunt here in Arizona. And it's just been It's just been sensational to see what Bruce Arians has done, even with backup quarterbacks. Because when Carson Palmer's played, they've won. I mean, almost they've been almost perfect with Carson Palmer under center. But he's won with Stanton. He's found ways to make it work with guys like Logan Thomas and not Ryan Lindley, because that playoff game was just atrocious. But yeah, I mean, all the credit in the world to Arians, all the credit in the world to this Arizona organization. I think they're a top 5 organization in the NFL without question. So it'll be interesting to see. 3 games in, pump the brakes on all the, I've seen some undefeated talk in the circle of the Cardinals, but pump the brakes on that for sure. And let's move on to our next topic. The Dolphins and Jets are facing off at Wembley Stadium in London at 6:30 out here in the West. You going to be up for that game?
Hell no.
I'm a little bit different. I got my live show on Sundays at 8 a.m. and it's a 9:30 kickoff in the East. It's not it's not outrageous to me because I get up at 9 a.m. to watch college football and I get up at 10 a.m. to watch the NFL. So 9:30 doesn't seem like it's incredibly early. It was probably at one point in my life, maybe a decade ago. But these 9:30 starts are interesting. They used to stagger them so that they'd kick off at 1 Eastern, just like everybody else. I like that the London game stands out. How about you?
Well, I don't care that it stands out, but you know what? It's the NFL is doing it for one reason: money. I mean, this does give the diehard football fans an extra game to watch early, so you get a little bit more of an entire day of football as opposed to the 1, 4, and then the Sunday night games to watch. So you get that early start too at 9:30, so you get 4 games in a day. Then I mean that's. I don't know if a NFL football fan could ask for anything more than that. So for them, it's terrific. For the casual fan, I don't think it really matters. But like I said, at the bottom of the line, it's all about the money.
It is all about the money, but the Dolphins have to be compensated in some way for giving up this home game. I don't know how season ticket holders feel about it. I know how I would feel about it if I were a season ticket holder for a team that had to go over there. Thus far, the Browns and Cardinals have not. Taking a home game away for these neutral site games, is it the owners just letting it come down to the money, or is it everybody gets their turn?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I mean, other than Jacksonville, which seems to be trying to get a game out there every year, I mean, does anybody else really pine to go all the way over to London or some of these other places they may be looking at in the future to have games in Europe? I mean, I know the Players Association supports it in its current format, but I don't know if it'll ever change from anything beyond that.
Okay, they do have the 3 games there every year, and they've sold every game out. Do you think it's because of the novelty, or do you think that they're just rabid over there and football hungry for a full-time team, if not 2 full-time teams?
I mean, they had NFL Europe over there for a while, and the league ended up folding after, I don't know, it was like 5 or 6 years. So I think some of it's the novelty. I mean, I still think it'll be tough to get a team over there full-time. I could see them definitely increasing the games. I know that's been talked about going up to possibly 8 games. So I definitely think that's a possibility, but I don't know if it'll ever get any bigger than that. And there's just so many logistical issues and stuff that I'm sure you're going to get into that I think are going to prevent having a full-time team there.
Yeah, and the way that they propose it, almost like the team would have to play half of their season. They'd have to play eight weeks straight over there, and then 8 weeks straight in the States, just so that there's not that jet lag issue. I mean, as it is, they're giving every team that plays over there a bye week immediately after, so they can recover from the travel and everything, the travel and the jet lag and everything else. It'd be fun. It'd be interesting to see if they put 2 teams over there. So there's a game literally every Sunday in the city of London, to see how to see if it wanes off as we get into the winter months. Especially if you put a team like Jacksonville that's been a 3-13, 4-12, maybe 5-11 team every year. Where does the interest die if you're seeing the same team week to week and the novelty's gone? But what happens if one of these teams makes the playoffs and gets home field throughout, and you got to go to London? You got to win a wild card game, and then you go to London for a divisional round game, and if you win that, you got to come back to the States, and you don't get that bye week. before the AFC, NFC championship, whatever it would be.
A logistical nightmare, which is I think is the key to this whole situation, as you were just mentioning the possibilities. And I mean, you said, talking about having to play 8 straight games out there and 8 here. I think the other option would probably be to do like 4 out there, 4 in the States, 4 out there, 4 back in the States would be the probably the easiest solution, I guess, because I mean, you can't have teams going out there every other week or anything like that, and I just don't know how having 8 there and 8 over here is necessarily realistic. Maybe it is. I think the 4-4-4 format could work, but I mean, we didn't even get into the tax issues. I mean, the taxes over there are much higher than they are here. It's like a 45% rate over 150,000 pounds. So that's another thing. I mean, are you going to get players that will even go play over there with that high tax rate, or are you going to have to pay them so much more than others, and then that screws up your salary cap situation? So there's just a lot of logistical things that go in there that I think are going to prevent it from ever being more than a novelty, whether it's the 3 games or 8 games or whatever.
Well, let me add this, and I tend to agree with you on just about all of that. And it's still only because O.C. Human brought it up that he wants to be the first GM of a London-based franchise, that he could take rugby players and convert them. We've seen Jared Hayne return kicks for San Francisco. I think that he's more of an outlier than the typical rugby player, but how long do you think it takes if we make the NFL mainstream over in Europe for the talent pool to come from there as well as over here? Because there aren't many players that aren't American born that play in the NFL. How long do you think it takes before the Germans and the French start producing football players that that come to maybe come to American colleges, or maybe college football becomes a thing over there?
Well, I mean, I guess the best examples I can say is you can look at the NBA or even Major League Baseball. Think about how many players play in, whether it's the Olympics or in the professional leagues over there, like in Japan and Korea and stuff like that. And for basketball, I mean, you've got all those teams over there as well throughout Europe and Asia and all that. And how many of those players actually come into the U.S. pro sports and actually are successful? I think it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you may get a handful, and I just don't know that it's a sustainable talent factor there. I mean, sure, it's possible, but I think you'd still be kind of looking at the same percentage. What is it, 1%, 2% of the actual players from there or ever make a significant contribution to a U.S. pro sports team?
Yeah, I mean, it's a small percentage. I mean, the NBA is smaller, and basketball, baseball, all those. I mean, NFL is really the exclusive North American sport, even though we've had NFL Europe and the World League and everything else. The NFL, American football is, just such a United States thing, and that's why we don't get the international factor nearly as much as we see it in other sports. That's about all the time we're going to have this week. I can't wait to do it again. We're talking to you Suits and Laterals. You can get us on suitsandlaterals.com. You can download us on iTunes. Pretty much anywhere with an RSS feed where you can download podcasts, you're going to find the Suits and Laterals podcast on the 4 Lights FM podcast network. Any parting thoughts, Chris Green?
Yeah, so let's see how many teams after this week are 3-0. A couple of challenges out there for sure, and I look forward to another exciting week of NFL football.
As do I. I mean, we could have a couple 0-4 teams still. We could have a couple of 4-0 teams. But quarter of the season's a pretty decent sample size. So that's going to do it for us tonight. For Chris Green, I'm Jeff Rich. This has been Suits and Laterals.